The movie begins with two young relatives, 9-year-old Richard and 7-year-old Emmeline. They were on a large ship, returning home from a long journey with Richard's father. The children were being mischievous, and Richard's father, in his frustration, disciplined them. Suddenly, a fire broke out on the ship, the flames spreading with alarming speed. A thick, blinding smoke quickly enveloped everyone, turning the ship into a scene of utter chaos. Unable to see anything, panic spread. Richard's father and a few others managed to get onto a lifeboat, desperate to save themselves. The ship's cook, a man named Paddy, took Richard and Emmeline with him in a small boat. The dense smoke from the fire made it impossible to see, and they drifted far away from the others. Paddy and the two children were left lost in the middle of the sea, completely alone without any food or water. The next morning, they spotted an island in the distance. Paddy was overjoyed, and with great effort, they finally reached the shore. The island was a paradise of green foliage and coconut trees. Paddy began to explore, hoping to find people, but the island was completely deserted. They were trapped. However, Paddy realized the island had everything they needed to survive. He also found a barrel of liquor that had washed up on the shore. While playing, Richard found a human skull and ran with it to Paddy. When Paddy saw it, he immediately told him to throw it away, realizing the island held danger. He quickly moved the children to the other side of the island. At night, while Paddy was drinking, he heard the sound of drums. Quietly, he swam to the other side where he discovered a statue with a piece of human flesh on it. Paddy realized they were performing human sacrifices, and he became terrified. He quickly returned to Richard and Emmeline, telling them, "Promise me that no matter what, you must never cross to the other side of the island. This is the law, and you must follow it." The children were full of questions, but Paddy told them that cannibals lived there and ate children. Richard, all this time, held on to the belief that his father would come to rescue them. Paddy also believed they would be saved eventually, and until then, he took responsibility for the children. He taught them how to find food and build a shelter. He spent 2 full months teaching them how to survive in this jungle in case something happened to him. And one night, Paddy drank too much liquor. He saw his barrel of liquor sinking into the sea, and, in his drunken state, rushed to get it. He began to drown and couldn't save himself. The next morning, when Richard and Emmeline woke up, Paddy was gone. They saw him with a telescope lying on the sand on the other side of the island. They took the small boat and went to him, thinking he was just sleeping from drinking too much. They tried to wake him up, but he didn't stir. That's when they realized Paddy had died. They were heartbroken. Now they were completely alone. Emmeline told Richard she couldn't stand living there anymore because everything reminded her of Paddy. She begged him to take her anywhere else. Richard listened, and they gathered their belongings, got into the boat, and went to the other side of the island. That part of the jungle was suitable for living, and food and water were plentiful. The two of them built a new home there. In the beginning, they struggled, but everything Paddy had taught them made it easier. Little by little, they learned how to live on the island. A few years passed, and they grew up together. Richard was now 21 years old, and Emmeline was 19. They lived a peaceful life, catching fish and gathering fruit. They began to feel physical and emotional changes that they didn't understand.
One day while Emmeline was bathing, she had her first menstrual period. Frightened by the sight of blood, she called out to Richard. When he came, she was embarrassed and told him to go away. Later, when she came out of the water, Richard asked her what had happened, thinking she was badly injured, but Emmeline didn't tell him anything, which made Richard very upset. He felt that she was hiding things from him, something she had never done before. Slowly, they began to be more attracted to each other. Emmeline would watch Richard from a distance when he walked around without a shirt, and Richard would watch her while she bathed in the river. Because they had been trapped there since childhood, they had no social knowledge and didn't understand these feelings. They lived happily, joking and laughing together, but they never lost hope that Richard's father would one day rescue them. One day, Emmeline heard the drums again from the side of the island Paddy had forbidden them to go to. Her curiosity got the better of her and she went alone. She found the same statue with strange dripping blood. Emmeline thought it was a sacred spiritual place. She ran to Richard and told him she had gone to the other side of the island and found a sacred statue. She told him Patty had lied and that there were no cannibals. Richard was furious. He angrily told her they had promised Patty they wouldn't go there and that she had made a huge mistake. He warned her never to go there again. That night, while sleeping, Emmeline had a terrible dream that Richard was drowning and she couldn't save him. She woke up terrified and in tears. She saw Richard standing in front of her, worried, and she begged him to promise that he would never leave her. They were both deeply affected and hugged tightly. Richard tried to get closer to her, but she quickly pushed him away. That night, Richard tried to get close to her with tenderness again, but Emmeline firmly told him to leave her alone. This made Richard very upset, and the next morning he didn't talk to her or look at her. Emmeline saw him doing something strange behind a rock and called to him. He shouted at her to leave. A little later, while picking coconuts from a tall tree, he saw a ship at sea for the first time in many years. He quickly climbed down and ran with all his might to the hill, where he had gathered wood to make a fire and get the attention of the people on the ship. But he was too late and the ship sailed away. Emmeline also saw the ship, but even though she could have lit a fire, she didn't. She had grown to love this life and accepted it. When Richard arrived, he was furious with her for not helping. He told her he was sick of everything and would leave the island alone. He took the small boat and left, determined to abandon the island. But halfway out to sea, his boat suddenly broke and sank. He was forced to return to the island, feeling defeated. Emmeline started mocking him, telling him sarcastically that this island was their home now and they had to accept it. Richard became enraged and a fierce fight broke out. They began to insult each other with harsh words. Emmeline angrily said she knew what he was doing behind the rock and that she would tell his father he came back. Richard was furious and said, "What? You've been watching me the whole time?" She replied that he too had been watching her while she bathed. Richard, in a fit of rage, threw a coconut at her, but it missed. When she threw one back, it hit him on the head and hurt him badly. In a moment of pure anger, he slapped her, kicked her out of the house, and told her she couldn't live there or have his food. This forced Emmeline to sleep outside in the cold. It was very difficult for her to find food on her own. She became weak and exhausted while Richard mocked her and refused to help. Emmeline began placing flowers on the statue and praying with all her faith. On her way back from the sea, she stepped on a poisonous stonefish, which caused her great pain and made her unable to walk. Somehow, she managed to return to the island, suffering greatly. When Richard saw Emmeline sick and unable to walk, he asked her in fear what had happened. She told him about the stonefish and that she was very sick from the poison. She begged him to take her to her sacred place. Richard carried Emmeline in his arms and took her to the statue. Emmeline's condition was very bad and she fainted, lying between life and death. Richard was terrified. He prayed sincerely for her to heal. After a while, Emmeline woke up, completely healed. The peaceful energy of the place had helped her recover. Richard was overjoyed and told her he had been so scared of losing her and of being alone on the island. Emmeline, crying, told him she thought he was still angry with her. With a smile, Richard told him he was no longer angry. The two of them returned to their home.
One day, they were sitting together, talking. They looked at each other with love and finally acted on their feelings. This was the first time they truly understood the feeling that had been growing inside them for years. They spent a lot of time together and lived as if they were a couple. Many months passed, and Richard noticed Emmeline was not as close to him as before, and her behavior had changed. He asked her if she no longer loved him. She told him she didn't know and that she felt sick and was vomiting. She put Richard's hand on her stomach and told him she felt something different inside her. The truth was that Emmeline was pregnant, but neither of them had any idea. Richard thought she was just eating a lot, which is why her stomach was growing. One night, Richard heard the drums again and went to investigate. He found some of the natives offering a sacrifice to a man in front of the statue.
Terrified, he ran back to Emmeline, who was now screaming very loudly as she went into labor. Richard ran to her and helped her give birth to a boy. They were both so happy and named the boy Paddy. They brought their son to the hut, and he was crying. They tried to give him food and water, not knowing he needed to breastfeed from his mother. When Emmeline took the child in her arms, he began to nurse. After that, Richard told Emmeline about the natives he had seen and that they would not let anyone harm their new family. They were happier than ever and loved their son dearly. Several years passed and their son grew up. They taught him how to swim, play, and speak. One day, they were all on the shore, covered in wet mud and playing. At that time, Richard's father, with some men on a ship, was still looking for them. When they saw them from a distance covered in mud, they didn't recognize them and returned to the ship. Richard and Emmeline saw the ship, but they didn't know Richard's father was on it. They didn't signal it because they were happy with their life and didn't want to return to a society that would not understand them. Later, Richard took Emmeline and their son by boat to the island where Paddy had died to gather fruit. They stayed there for a few months, watching the surroundings and remembering their childhood. Later, Richard went to pick fruit while Emmeline was playing with their son on the shore. Their son picked some poisonous berries and put them in their boat. Emmeline didn't see it. They returned to the boat to wait for Richard. Emmeline's eyes drifted shut, and when she woke up, she found that the boat had drifted from the shore. At that moment, their son threw an oar into the water. Emmeline tried to retrieve it, but couldn't. She called Richard immediately. Richard ran toward them, and Emmeline told him there was a shark behind them. Richard quickly went toward the boat without an oar. To save him from the shark, Emmeline hit the shark with the second oar. This gave Richard a chance to get into the boat, but now they had no oars to return to their island. They tried to row with their hands, but the current was very strong, and their fear of a shark attack kept them from swimming. The boat began to drift out to sea. They remained lost at sea for 2 days. Their son became hungry and ate the poisonous berries. Richard and Emmeline tried to take the berries out of his mouth, but he had already swallowed them. They thought their son would die, so the two of them also ate the berries, choosing to die with him rather than live without him. They lay in the boat waiting for death and fainted. The berries weren't that poisonous though, they just caused them to faint. After a while, Richard's father, on his ship, spotted Richard's small boat with his binoculars. He and his men went to check on them. They found Richard, Emmeline, and their son unconscious. Richard's father asked if they were dead. A man answered him saying they were just asleep. And with that, the events of today's film come to an end. Stay tuned for new videos and summaries. Goodbye.